Hey everybody, it's Matt Shares, CEO of SBI. I'm here for another episode of the Revenue Growth Help Desk. As many of you know, we at SBI have this interesting place in the ecosystem that we get to get a lot of feedback about how people are working through COVID-19, how they're thinking about revenue growth, and how they're revising their strategies. And I'm really pleased. One of my good buddies, and happens to also be a colleague, Chris Davy, has joined me. I'm going to have Chris introduce himself, and we're going to go a little specific from an industry perspective today. And Chris and I are going to talk about the disruption and the reimagination of what's happening in industrial businesses, specifically transportation and logistics, as Chris is one of our managing directors and he leads that practice. So Chris, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you as well, Matt. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so where are you these days? North Carolina?
Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah.
So we have Charlotte, North Carolina and Scottsdale, Arizona, probably two decent weather places going at it. And other than Chris being an Ohio State fan, which is not a good thing, he's actually a fairly likable human. But Chris, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and I guess specifically your background and why you're more than qualified to speak about the industry disruption in T&L.
Yeah, sure thing, Matt. So I am a managing director at SBI. Been here for 3 years. Prior to that, spent about 25 years in sales, marketing, corporate strategy in the transportation and logistics industry. Across pretty much all modes, everything from warehousing to ocean to small parcel to truck. So I lead the logistics and transportation practice at SBI, and that's why Matt's got me on here to chat about what's going on in today's crazy environment.
Yeah, so audience, Chris and I, the way we're going to get started and to ground this conversation in structure, what you're looking at on the screen is our 8-step framework. On the left-hand side, you see what we call revenue protection. And there's really 4 phases to that. On the right-hand side, you see what we're calling phase 2, which is around revising the revenue growth strategy. And what's interesting and why I asked Chris is that every week our team at SBI is paying attention to the questions we're getting asked, what's coming in the chat, the different webinars that we lead, and our marketing team and our client team communications. And there's been a big surge around this construct around retention and how people are hanging on. So Chris and I are going to talk about retention is the new growth, but we're going to talk about it in the context of T&L. So Chris, I guess what's happening, because you've had some pretty dynamic conversations the last almost 30 days, because I think you saw this coming before some of us saw it coming because of where T&L companies sit.
Yeah, it's been interesting, right? With the conversations I've had, probably the number one challenge that I think any transportation executive is facing is it's unprecedented, right? And you can say that for a lot of industries, but there are sometimes disruptions in supply chains. If you have a hurricane, if you have something local, but nothing on the scale of complete global disruption of supply chain. And for transportation companies here in the US, their customer base is literally shifting immediately. So you think about certain industries like automotive or retail, almost completely shut down. And if that was your customer base, all of a sudden now you're trying to pivot to, do I try and serve grocery replenishment? Do I try to serve e-commerce home deliveries like you see Amazon, right? Hiring thousands of people to try and keep up with demand. Yeah. So while the industry's struggling, it's actually an opportunity for them to make a lot of money, but they have to be careful as far as how much they commit to do during the chaos versus what capacity is going to be when this all ends, which it will in a couple of months.
So Chris, you and I are of the same age, so good or bad, we have lived through a lot of disruptions together, and dating back to the mid-90s, late 90s, and I think maybe something that I know was interesting for me when you and I caught up yesterday in preparation for this was just sort of hearing the disruption that you saw happen when you were at UPS. And it's starting to pull through and you're noticing some of these different behaviors. So I guess my question would be, if you think about retention and coverage, what maybe 1 or 2 of the big things you're seeing people ask specific to the industry and some of the advice that you and the team are giving?
Yeah, so it's a great reference back to the UPS strike in '97 because it's the closest thing that I've seen to truly a national disruption. Now, granted, that was just primarily one mode, small parcel, but I'll tell you, like we were talking about the other day, what we did well back then versus what we learned at Airborne Express, right, which got bought by DHL. So we knew the strike was coming. Everybody was reading it in the news, so we had time to prepare. And what we put in place that was the right move was a bunch of caveats that said, we won't take on more than 10% volume from existing clients. We won't take on any brand new clients that don't fit our typical profile. So for an example, back then, we were predominantly B2B delivery. We didn't want to get into the residential side. But as soon as everyone knew or thought the UPS strike was imminent, we were getting calls left and right from everybody, us and FedEx. Can you take our shipments? Can you take our shipments? Well, we had all these rules in place, which was great, but what we didn't do well was execute. Because as soon as those phone calls started coming and all the salespeople who still had the same compensation plans were picking up the phone, taking it, and there was no way to monitor what was actually getting signed up. Now, 97, a lot different than today as far as how you monitor and pricing and bringing clients in, but it was a free-for-all. And the net of it was that during the UPS strike, we were completely shut down. We had tractor trailers full of freight sitting for weeks on end at our airport hub, and it lasted for a month and a half after it. What we learned was we damaged the relationships of our clients who were really the ideal customers that we had been wanting to do business with before, and we wanted to do business with afterwards because we took care of clients and got greedy in the interim. And I guarantee you that anybody in the transportation world right now is struggling with that very same conundrum because they want revenue. They have to get cash to move through things, but you got to be careful not to overcommit to what wouldn't be a client you would want to serve when this all passes.
So, okay, so that's fascinating. So, Chris, then I'm compelled to say I need this temporary revision to my go-to-market operating model, but I can't cannibalize my ideal go-to-market model, but I don't know if I got to batten down the hatches for 3 months or 6 months. If we pick the long side, and I'm not a COVID-19 forecaster, so I'll take what I saw on Fox News and relay it today. 6 months. Where do I go and what should I do? And if we use the framework to help the viewers and the listeners, where do you take them, Chris?
Yeah, I take them to, you got to figure out how it is you're going to communicate with your clients with what's going on. Now, in some cases, again, I'll use the retail example. Business is pretty much stopped. Nobody is taking truckloads to retail stores because they're all closed. So you want to make sure that you have the sales team, the account management team, customer success, whatever you have it in place, is being very communicative and very vocal with their current clients. Yep. Some business, trucking companies, small parcel companies, Amazon, you have to take it on for philanthropic reasons, right? You want to help with grocery deliveries. You want to help with getting medical supplies out. But the thing I would say is you got to have a tight process of when you bring these clients on, or when you bring on clients who maybe the carrier they used to use went out of business. Trucking, for example, 250,000 trucking companies in the US average 5 trucks in the fleets. So there's a lot of companies that will be going out of business because of what's going on. Yeah. If you are a merchant carrier, you're going to be taking on that business. Be very careful that when the capacity ramps back up, that you're documenting how long you'll serve them for. Don't do long-term pricing commitments. Don't do long-term contracts. Do more spot pricing. Do more, look, we'll help you for the next 30 days, but that's all I can guarantee and that's all I can commit to. And make sure you've isolated out that ideal customer profile. The other piece I'd say, Matt, is I think there's probably a lot of, well, I know there's a lot of executives struggling with what do they do with their salespeople? Because in some transportation companies, there's industry specialization. So somebody might be specialized on automotive, and that's what their task was selling. How do you deploy that resource? Do you take that person off and you have them start focusing on helping clients in the grocery? How do you adjust their compensation plans? I know you did one of these podcasts with Chris Gosling last week that talked about how to deal with quota and comp in times like this. And I think that's something that transportation companies have to be paying very close attention to, because at the end of the day, a point you and Chris talked about, for a lot of these salespeople, especially in this industry, variable comp for them, 50, 60, sometimes 70% of what they make and how they're paying their bills and their mortgages in a time like this. So you got to be careful looking at the options there too.
Yeah, I mean, so Chris, so I guess it leads me to, so that's very helpful. And then if I think about sort of this revision of the go-to-market strategy and the coverage model, then I'm also thinking about the types of people that I'm sending out to these new verticals. So the only thing I can feel here the first week of April as you and I have this conversation is like, I got to get a good enough model done to have 90 days-ish of visibility, to have activity not go so far outside my line of ideal customer, ideal client. But am I going to permanently expand and service those clients post-COVID, Chris, or do I shut that down? Because there's still a
great question. Right, so it could be an opportunity for some people to actually pick up additional revenue or additional clients that they didn't have access to before. And obviously, it's a good way to build brand equity if you're willing to help shippers that you wouldn't have done business with before, or shippers that had their carrier stop servicing them or not be able to pick up all the extra volume. But again, I'd reference back to the example in '97 that we learned is if you get too greedy, you can find yourself in a place of taking on too much now, and then when the other volume starts picking back up, you can't serve everybody. So protect the core. But yeah, you have to be very deliberate in a segmentation model of what you can do on a month by month, or really even a week by week basis in today's environment. And then you may have a chance to actually expand into a few new customers or even a vertical that you didn't do before.
Okay, so as I move to the last question, so I got a great takeaway relative to kind of a rapid or hyper segmentation, as you say. I think about that coverage expansion that takes my addressable market a little broader, and I'm probably still going to cover those clients. Maybe I've got a different cost model, pricing model, and I don't know enough about the sector to know what you know, but I think the audience gets it. My last one, I guess, would be around salespeople and sales management, right? T&L has a certain type of industry dynamic and certain folks that are used to doing things a certain way. I know you've been in a series of conversations with our clients that are in the space. Any kind of one or two tips you would share relative to taking care of talent, but potentially there's new talent to be had that could be in the marketplace, to your earlier point. So any guidance for the audience, Chris, there?
Yeah, I think, right, knowing this is a time where you want to take care of your A players, you want to take care of your top performers, and back to the conversation about the compensation, you might want to look at doing slight tweaks or changes where you don't have somebody completely based on shipment volume or revenue. What is it you want them focused on right now? And that might be something like an NPS score, or something like, can we get some of our core clients to re-sign a contract, or communication with the customer. The transportation industry, still very face-to-face. A lot of field salespeople. So there's a lot of executives and a lot of sales managers and salespeople that this is a very, very new thing for them. They're used to going out on the docks, talking to the shippers, talking to their clients, and they can't do that. Yeah. And candidly, in some cases, I mean, just doing video conferences and WebExes in shipping rooms and all that, it's not as common as you'd find in a lot of industries. So I think you have to be very open with your talented salespeople about how to do that and give them coaching on it, stay in touch with them, stay communicated. But then the other piece, Matt, is it sounds harsh, but there's probably some really good talent that's going to come on the market that otherwise wouldn't. And it might be an opportunity to make a move on some of the people that you wouldn't want to keep in the organization to upgrade your talent. So when we come out of COVID, you've got an A+ team.
And Chris, I guess one follow-up relative to different ways of communicating, it would seem to me, and based on what you had shared, and our marketing colleagues are leading the CMO component, the digital coverage seems like there's an opportunity because people can't travel and they're in their office, they're reading email, they're taking calls. Is it an opportunity for marketing departments to play a better role in revenue and customer touch point? And are you seeing T&L marketing leaders lean in?
Yes, but just like everyone else, it's a time to do that from a connectivity standpoint. and telling them what's going on and keeping them up to date on what's happening in your network and delays. It is not a time for demand generation or for selling. It's a time for developing brand equity, developing relationships, and keeping people up to speed.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well, great to see you if it has to be in these conditions. But thanks for coming on, Chris. That was really, really helpful. Very, very targeted. So appreciate the time, brother.
My pleasure, Matt. Good talking to you always.
All right, for everybody else out there, as Chris said, it is a time for brand equity, but it's also ensuring that all of you stay safe. So I appreciate Chris's insights and what the team has put together, and we look forward to seeing you along the way.